A warning tonight for parents.
The controversial video game is hitting stores.
Child advocates want you to know about a graphic
and gruesome video games ever produced for a mass market.
Takes gaming violence to a whole new level.
Effectively banned in 2 countries, given adults only.
Should we parents be worried for real? We should be
ripping people's heads off and blood is
some of the most horrific, senselessly violent stuff you've ever seen.
Violent. It's been banned in Britain. In fact,
callous, bleak, and full of unrelenting violence.
You are over your victim, plunging the knife into the victim as you play the game.
Act out murder, stabbing, even torture and strangulation.
Axe killings, mutilations, even castration from a pair of pliers. Yikes.
and why anyone would want to play that creepy, disturbing game is beyond me, but
not many video games have been riddled with controversy and backlash by the media, quite as much as Manhunt 2. It's widely regarded as the most violent game of all time, and it's one of very few games that had to be heavily censored just to see a release on store shelves. Was all this controversy justified? Is it as bad as the media portrayed it out to be? To find out, I went back to the sleazy streets of Cottonmouth and brought you this video, in which we'll go through the storyline together, uncover the mysteries of the project, and learn more about the trouble Rockstar went through to get this game out. Following that, we'll compare the various versions of Manhunt 2 to find out about the differences between the censored and uncensored versions, and what content was lost along the way. Manhunt 2 starts at the Dixmoor Asylum for the criminally insane. A severe thunderstorm causes the security system to go offline just long enough for all the cell doors to open and the inmates escaping their cells. Mayhem ensues at the facility as the rather ruthless orderlies attempt to take control of the situation. This is where we're introduced to our protagonist dannylamb as he chokes the life out of a doctor while seemingly going through a psychotic episode. A mysterious man named Leokasper appears, another inmate at the asylum. He encourages us to join him in his escape. Doesn't take long for the game to establish its unusual tone. Not even a minute into gameplay and we've already been spat at, pissed on, and have literal shit thrown at us. As we advance, it becomes immediately clear the kind of influence Leo has over Danny as he instructs him to kill everyone he comes across throughout the facility. Something he seems to take great joy in doing.
Oh, hey! We're running out of people to kill!
Taking out the first guard makes Danny so sick to his stomach that he pukes on his corpse, and then proceeds to kick him, repeatedly. After the pair escapes the asylum together in the back of a trash truck, they go to the ruins of Danny's old house to recover a drug that Leo claims Danny has stashed there. He somehow knows a lot about Danny's life, while Daniel himself seems to be suffering from amnesia and is utterly clueless.
Danny, listen. It's a manhunt, and they won't stop until we're both dead.
Roll credits.
The house is barely standing and looks like it has been through a fire. There's an ominous feeling here as we search for the medicine. Danny is hit with these creepy visions that make him question his own sanity. Spooky stuff. When we find the drugs, the house gets ambushed by a group of agents called the Watchdogs, who are working for a mysterious organization titled the Pickmanproject. Daniel brutally murders the agents and then administers the drug, which seems to clear his head a little as he starts to recall fragments of his past. He also finds a matchbox with the name Judy written over it. Having nothing else to go on, he decides to follow up on the clue and together with Leo ventures out to unravel the mysteries of his former life. And that's the premise of the game. We're playing as this mentally unstable man who has no memories of his past, while being accompanied by his strange friend Leo throughout the entire game. The journey will take us through several peculiar places in Cottonmouth as we strive to solve the riddle of Danny's past and the Pickman Project. It's a lot more plot heavy this time in contrast to the first game. There's this big government conspiracy, more characters, more cutscenes, and more dialogue in general.
I don't believe this shit!
And the protagonist here has an actual personality, compared to Cash, who barely speaks in the first game. Manhunt 2 is not continuing the story from the first game. We don't meet any of the old characters or gangs, and it even takes a completely different approach to horror. It's more of a psychological horror experience, and it's disturbing in its own unique way. While I prefer the first game over this one, I do respect the fact that they made something entirely different and didn't go for the snuff film angle again. Having said that, the game is still a hit and miss for me, and I'll explain why during the video. Anyhow, the first place that our duo goes to next is a strip club where they encounter a sadomasochist gang, appropriately called the Pervs. Here we're looking for Dr. Judy Sender, a project scientist, as Danny believes she might have some answers for him. He butchers all the perverts in the strip club and tries to enter the underground fetish dungeon, but the guard won't let any strangers in. So Danny improvises with a fire axe and greets the guard with a more familiar face. The guard lets us in, but then immediately regrets that decision. The underground dungeon has got to be one of the most disgusting places in the series. The fetishes have gone a step too far and people are being slaughtered down here. The sequel seems to have a lot more of these kinds of sexually perverted environments, whereas the first game mainly focused on abandoned locations with highly dangerous gangs. I have to say, for a man who was throwing up over executing someone with a syringe not too long ago, our hero has quickly evolved into a mean killing machine as he takes these dudes out in the most preposterous ways. At the end of this chapter, we do catch up to Judy and attempt to get some information, but upon hearing Leo's name, she gets freaked out and leaves. Though not before giving Daniel a key to his old safe house, located above a rundown porn theater, red light district. See what I mean with the locations? Judy claims he will get some answers there, but Leo doesn't trust her and insists that she's setting them up. In desperation, Danny goes anyway and Leo reluctantly joins him. A red light, the boys run into some crooks that call themselves the Red Kings.
This is our fucking turf now! The Kings are taking over!
And police officers a little further on. Unlike the first game, both Daniel and Leo can come across innocent citizens that the player can choose to kill as well. This dude, for instance, is just a civilian and was not hostile at all, and there are a few more instances where this occurs. In the first game, you were a bad man, killing other bad men. The game never toyed with the idea of humanizing Cash. Here, I get the sense that Rockstar wanted us to sympathize with Daniel. Sure, he's doing atrocious things, but as we'll later find out, it's not his fault. Say you buy that story. It's still very hard to sympathize with this guy, and not only because of his actions. If you ask me, Rockstar simply didn't do a good enough job of fleshing out his character and making us care about him, especially compared to some of their other protagonists. We never saw Danny acting as a decent human, not even during any of the flashbacks. He wasn't a particularly likable guy at all, and comes across as a whiny asshole at best. So I just didn't care for him. In any case, Danny gets chased by some watchdogs through a fire escape before arriving at the safe house, where he discovers a picture of himself with a man named Michael Grant. This triggers a flashback, and in my view, where the game starts to fall apart a little. I found that most of these flashback missions were pretty terrible and uninteresting. The locations were boring and it sort of turns into a third-person shooter, and not a very good one at that. This is a good time to quickly discuss the gameplay. Trigger warning, I'm about to throw a bit of a tantrum over all of the technical issues and gameplay changes that I hated. Let's start with the shooting then, which is not a strong point of either Manhunt game, but I found it to be significantly worse here. From what I've heard, most people disagree with me on this, but I felt that the aiming was so awkward and all over the place. I really f***ing hated it. I hate the fact that it snaps onto the head for automatic headshots when you're close enough, and I hate that it's wobbly and inaccurate. I don't know. I genuinely prefer the free aim from the first game. I don't understand why it has to lock onto the head in the PC version. I want to aim myself, not have the game do it for me. Now let's talk about the camera. I can live with it being a bit shaky. It sort of adds a cinematic feel to the game and it fits with the whole insane guy vibe, I guess. But not being able to move the camera in the Y-axis at all, like you can't freely move the camera up and down. What? Who thought that was a good idea? It limits your view and it feels straight up unnatural to play that way. You can only look up and down if you're standing still and enter the first person view. Another thing that was odd is that the game was locked at 30 frames per second. I found a third-party patch that fixed this issue, but that shouldn't have been an issue to begin with. There are ways to fix the camera movement too, but I couldn't get both working simultaneously, so I went with the higher frame rate over the camera. And then finally the AI. The f***ing AI. It's so much worse than the first game. These guys will walk in such an unpredictable and frustrating pattern. They'll abruptly turn around as you're stalking them, and a lot of times they'll get stuck doing this. This happened a lot. I mean, a lot. It happens so many times that it honestly breaks the immersion and downright blemishes the entire game in my opinion. I ran into a few other glitches as well, but apart from that, it's a great game. So don't let my bitching fool you.
Don't trust that whore.
It's an experience unlike any other in gaming. A few mishaps are not going to take that away from it. Matter of fact, let's go over some of the good stuff too while we're at it. The core gameplay is still the same old Manhunt we love. You sneak around in the shadows and try not to make any noise. You'll make noise even doing simple tasks like running, slamming a door open, or accidentally knocking over an object, among other things. So you have to be mindful of your movements. Certain world elements like nearby helicopters or loud machinery will impair your opponent's hearing, which allows you to move around faster without being detected. In addition, you can now break light sources to create new shadows to hide in. While in the shadows, a new mechanic is introduced where at times a hunter will investigate a bit closer, and you have to keep the cursor inside a moving circle to control your breathing and remain hidden. Like before, there are 3 levels of executions you can perform with each weapon, and they get increasingly more gruesome the longer you hold down the button. All the more so in this game, actually. Additionally, you now have the ability to crawl through vents and under certain obstacles, and also climb up on surfaces, which lets you perform jumping executions from above. Moreover, you have environmental executions as well, so if you ever wanted to drown the hunter in the toilet or choke them to death with a telephone cord, well, now you can. So yeah, the game does introduce several legitimate improvements to the gameplay, and there are also lots of new weapons to play around with, so it's pretty outstanding when all of it is working as it should. Manhunt 2 is at its best when you're sneaking around in the sketchy locations, sticking to the shadows and attacking from the darkness. If you can overlook some of the technical issues and don't mind a few poor chapters dedicated to the mediocre shooting mechanics, you're bound to have a good time here. Granted, you're into dark and violent games. Anyway, let's continue where we left off. The flashback takes us back 6 years, where a distraught Danny is demanding Michael to take the Pickman bridge out of his brain so that he can think straight. More on the Pickman bridge soon. Michael refuses and the project militia arrives. Leo appears out of nowhere and says he'll take care of this, ultimately catching up to Michael and blowing his head off, retrieving the key to the boat. As they drive off, Leo declares war on the project. From here on, the game jumps back and forth between present day and flashbacks to Leo's mischiefs years ago. Next, the duo goes after Judy again, this time in a brothel called Bee's Honeypot. This section ends with her getting shot and telling us not to trust anybody.
Don't trust anybody, especially...
No!
Then we get another flashback to a scene where a project scientist has just been assassinated, and we escape from the militia. Thereafter, at present day, we're ambushed by a pack of bounty hunters known as the Bloodhounds, who are under orders from the project to kill Danny and Leo. This leads to a chase that involves a helicopter and escalates through the sewage system. Exiting the underground, the pair emerges in an old garage surrounded by the watchdogs. Having dealt with them, the sight of RSV gasoline triggers yet another flashback. This time, Leo breaks into a project archive facility to burn their records of himself and Danny. He murders a bunch of innocent security guards here, and then some watchdogs too. Back at present day, our boys find themselves outside a medical facility where they spot Dr. Pickman entering the building. Danny decides to break in the hope that he can coax the doctor into helping them. He kills his way through the building, eventually getting to the project laboratories. He uses an alt trick to get past the security door and then does some more killing, ultimately reaching this auditorium. When we approach the chair in the center, Danny has a flashback to what seems to be some sort of brainwashing experiment. Following that, Dr. Pickman utters a phrase through the speakers that makes Daniel collapse and wake up to an agent watching over him. We eliminate the agent and take out this innocent doctor too, then work our way back down to Dr. Pickman and blow his head off. No, wait, get this tranquilizer gun first and put him to sleep. And here we discover that... I think you know. I'm about to spoil the twist.
Say it.
Are you ready?
Say it.
Danny and Leo are the same person.
That's right.
The Pickman Project is a government-sponsored secret organization that deals with research on a top-secret weapon experiment using brainwashing and mind control. The program's goal was to create the perfect assassin with the Pickman bridge. a brain implant containing the personality and skills of a trained assassin that could be remotely activated on command. In theory, the two personalities would coexist in the same mind with no knowledge of each other. However, a malfunction caused Danny to be able to see and communicate with Leo, driving him mad and turning him into a psychotic killer. Unbeknownst to Danny, Leo wants to take the Pickman bridge out of his head with the aim of taking over his body completely, but Pickman insists that that will kill him. The doc attempts to use that hypnotic phrase again that made Danny collapse earlier. Leo manages to stab him to death before passing out. Weeks later, Danny and Leo are in a project-owned TV studio, sifting through footage that may lead to some additional clues. Danny has no recollection of the events that transpired with Dr. Pickman. They spot a tape with Dr. Laura White, the project scientist Danny was choking in the beginning. Leo suggests they find her as she's the only one that can remove the Pickman bridge, when suddenly the studio gets invaded by bloodhounds. On set, we get a hold of a katana sword and swiftly deal with the intruders. The former employees of the TV MK Studios are seen massacred all around. If the player chooses to interact with his TV, you can see who is responsible. Outside the studio, we reach a farm that was used to record the TV show 5 past high noon. Here, Danny faces off against more bloodhounds, and the chapter ends with Dr. White unexpectedly showing up and sedating him. He wakes up at a hospital where Dr. White finally explains what is going on. The Pickman project had its government funding suddenly cut due to its controversial work methods. It was decided that a final experiment was to be conducted with the use of the Pickman bridge, which Daniel volunteered to as one of many test subjects in order to clear his family's debts. The malfunction of the implant caused a dissociative identity disorder, and Dr. White reveals that Leo, who Danny perceives to be a real person, has been working against him the entire time. She goes on to explain that Leo went on a killing spree across Cottonmouth, which included project scientists, militia members, police officers, SWAT members, and civilians, among others, destroying records from the project archives and, as we see in the final flashback, arriving at Daniel's former house and killing his wife. All for the sake of driving him to the point of losing complete grip of reality and submitting to Leo entirely. However, after his wife's murder, the project caught him and erased his memory, burned down the house, and locked him up at Dixmoor Asylum, where they were unsuccessfully trying to repair the damage caused by the implant. Upon learning the truth, Daniel is devastated and is eager to get rid of Leo, so Dr. White puts him into a deep hypnotic state where he confronts Leo in the confines of his own mind. He must face the horrors of his past and put his deceased wife to rest, so that he can finally defeat Leo and assert control over his mind and body.
You see? He can't get rid of me. Can never. My name is Daniel Lamb. My name is Daniel Lamb! My name is... I don't know my name.
He then wakes up on a deserted road with his memory wiped clean yet again and an envelope in his hand. He's been given a new name and a place of residence. With no recollection of his former life, Daniel Lamb walks off into the sunset. If you get a 3-star rating or higher on every level, a bonus mission with an alternate ending is unlocked. It also takes place inside Danny's mind, but this time you play as Leo in his conquest to defeat Danny. Throughout the level, we fight a group of Dixmoor inmates and failed project experiments called the Legion, in the end facing off against Daniel and killing him, effectively taking over his mind.
I won!
Manhunt 2 had one of the most disastrous releases in gaming history, getting outright banned in several countries around the world, including Germany, Malaysia, New Zealand, and South Korea. Rockstar never even submitted the game for classification in Australia, which is kind of funny. The controversy around the game started just days after its announcement, before any footage was even shown to the public, making it fairly evident that there was a heavy bias against the game. The UK murder mentioned in my last video on Manhunt 1 was the main point of discussion initially. The victim's parents still insisted that the first game was the main contributor in their son's death, a claim activist and disbarred attorney Jack Thompson supported them on. Thompson went on to state that the police were wrong in claiming that the game was found in the victim's room and not the perpetrators, further adding that Rockstar were lying about the incident. He vowed to sue Take-Two Interactive and Rockstar Games with the aim of having both Manhunt 2 and Grand Theft Auto 4 banned as public nuisances. Less than a month before the game's release, it was denied a rating in both the UK and Ireland, effectively banning it in those countries as well. The reason being the game's encouragement for visceral killing with little to no other motives. Rockstar responded saying that they strongly disagree with the board's decision, and that Manhunt 2 was an entertainment experience for fans of psychological thrillers and horror. They argued that their game was no more violent than films such as Saw and Hostel, which were granted a rating by the classification board. The biggest surprise came next, when the ESRB slapped the game with an AO rating, to which Sony, Nintendo and Microsoft all responded with that they do not allow AO-rated games on their platforms, essentially banning it in the US as well. Rockstar had no choice but to censor the game. The executions were altered with a blurring effect and an ugly red filter that flashes black and white. On top of that, all but 2 plot-related decapitations were removed and the executions for the pliers were changed. Innocent civilians were cut, and the score rating system at the end of each level was removed. The ESRB were satisfied with the changes and re-rated the game to an M rating. That decision received some backlash from several prominent figures, including Senator Hillary Clinton, who wrote a letter to the ESRB asking them to change the rating back to adults only.
Oh, I want everybody to know that exposure to violent video games is also bad for children.
Nevertheless, Manhunt 2 was released in the US with an M rating on October 31st, 2007 for the PSP, PS2 and the Wii. Hilariously, the very next day people found a way to remove the blurring effect from the PSP and PS2 versions, followed by the Wii version soon after. Even after the censor, the UK classification board still refused to classify the game. Rockstar appealed their decision, which led to a back-and-forth legal battle until the game was finally granted an 18 certificate and released in Europe exactly 1 year after its US release. The following year, the uncut and uncensored version of Manhunt 2 was released online by Rockstar with an official rating of AO. This version restores the game back to its original PS2 beta state, apart from a few changes. All the censoring and adjustments, in the end, resulted in quite a few differences between the versions, so let's take a closer look at some of them now. I'll start off by saying that in general, the PS2 beta and PC versions are the most violent, featuring the goriest executions, head explosions and decapitations. The PC version unsurprisingly looks far better graphically than the other versions, with the Wii coming in at second place. Of course, the PC version can be further enhanced with third-party features. The Wii and PC versions also sport more detailed bruising and blood effects on the hunters during combat, going as far as soaking our protagonist in blood during executions, which the PS2 and PSP versions lack altogether. Similarly, the PlayStation versions don't have facial animations at all for many of the hunters. Some of the dialogue, mainly Leo's post-kill commentary, was censored to sound as inoffensive as possible in the Wii, PS2 and PSP versions.
Damn, you are one sick fuck and I love it! Love it!
Another difference is that the Wii and PC versions feature interactive executions, where the player has to act out various gestures to carry out the kill. If you stop midway, the execution just ends, but the opponent dies anyway. On PC, you can turn this feature off, which I did by the way. It's just not that much fun and the executions look cooler without the prompts on screen. The PS2 beta and PC versions of the game are uncut and uncensored, while the Wii, PSP and PS2 retail versions have a horrible censoring filter discussed earlier splattered all over the screen. The filter is ridiculous to the point where you literally can't see shit. Bro, who'd want to play the game in this atrocious state? Rockstar must have been so pissed over having to do this. The PC version even allows you to remove the default red stylized filter present in the uncut version by playing in stereoscopic mode. Here's how it looks, and this is how you turn it on for anyone interested. Navigate to your Manhunt 2 shortcut, click on Properties, type in a hyphen mark, followed by stereo at the end of the target description, click Apply. You're welcome. Personally, I feel that the red filter kind of fits the whole Psycho on the Loose narrative. It adds a sense of Danny going through a psychotic episode during the executions, so I left it on. In any case, there are further differences even between the uncut PC and PS2 beta versions. Pretty much all the executions were longer and slightly more vicious in the beta version. Despite the PC version being uncut, the animations seem to have been shortened a little bit and the executions play out faster. I'm not sure if this was to tame the violence or an artistic decision, as you could argue that it sometimes looks more aggressive when it's faster. Here are some examples. As you can see, the beta version adds that extra icing on the cake. Firearm executions were far more extensive in the beta version, with each gun having its own set of 3 unique executions. On the PC, there's only one same execution for each class of firearms. However, these can thankfully be restored with the use of mods. There are also a bunch of minor cosmetic variations and animation changes between the versions. Some weapons are exclusive to certain versions, like the mace, which only appears in the Wii version. Again, on the PC you can restore most of these with mods, including the flashlight, the milk bottle, and the newspaper. Who knew a newspaper could be used this way? We're not going to go any deeper into all of the minute differences. If you want a full comprehensive list, head over to Manhunt. Link is in the description. Likewise, links for all of the mods mentioned here can be found in the description. Like with the first game, a lot of weapons didn't make it into the final version of the game at all. The blowtorch, metal hook, and the acid bottle are just some of them. The game originally had additional environmental executions, like this one, where we can see Danny tossing sprung cans at the hunter before finishing him off with a brutal knee, drilling a final can into his face. Or this one, where he dispatches of his opponent with a dumpster. While these two have been restored, there were plenty more that are lost forever, including smashing a TV over the hunter's head, hanging and drowning them in a bathtub. Sounds like some good old Manhunt fun, but unfortunately, we'll most likely never see these. There's definitely something special about Manhunt 2. It's not without its flaws, as I pointed out earlier, but it is excellent in many ways. It's not about the gangs or a prominent villain. Danny is not desperately fighting for his survival and freedom. Instead, there's a bigger conspiracy and mystery behind the plot. It's about a man losing his grip of reality, out on a bizarre adventure to uncover the truth. Take this mission for example, running around late at night in people's backyards while being hunted by the law, climbing over fences and killing everyone you stumble into. It's absurd, and that's exactly what it's supposed to be. The story, in my opinion, could have been more captivating though. I would like to have seen more interesting characters, especially a more fleshed out protagonist. The twist was a bit too predictable, and it would have been fun to have a few more hints and Easter eggs scattered throughout the game for future replays. But overall, Manhunt 2 still offers a genuinely dark and twisted psychological horror experience that I'm sure fans of the genre will enjoy. It's unfortunate that all the controversy overshadowed the game itself and probably killed off the franchise for good. Personally, I don't think all the criticism was warranted. The game is certainly disturbing and it gets insane at times, but that's one of the traits of psychological thrillers. Rockstar had a point in comparing it to movies like Saw and Hostel. Yes, one could argue that it gets more sensitive when you're acting out the kills with a Wiimote and nunchuck. But what about the fact that the violence in Saw is visually far more realistic than Manhunt 2's renderware graphics? Of course, neither of them should be censored. Like I said in my last video, they're intended for mature audiences, and for a piece of art to be banned, it better offer something a lot more outrageous than Manhunt 2. Thank you so much for watching. Now that we're done with the Manhunt series, I got a lot more gaming videos coming, and I'm reading all your comments and listening to suggestions. If you enjoy my content, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you guys in the next one.
Go on, get out of here.